We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
This is Doug Gillette, and you're listening to the Mankind podcast.
Looks like the rain has gone.
Welcome to the Mankind Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Clift, and today we are joined by my fellow host, Boyson Hodgson, and again, Douglas Gillette, co-author of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, as we dive into Axis Mundi. What is Axis Mundi? What does it even mean? It's not a familiar phrase or term. Well, it's all about getting centered. Now, many of us do a lot of work. Busy stuff that kind of keeps us tied and tethered to the external world, occupied by work, occupied by kids, occupied by social media perhaps. Yet how often do we find those quiet spaces and get centered, connected with ourselves internally? Well, as we've covered the male archetypes, the lover, the warrior, the magician, the king, over the past 4 episodes with Doug, now we come to Axis Mundi, what it means to be centered, right? To not be possessed by any of those energies, yet be able to remain in the middle and access those energies. So I wanted Boyson to come and join us because Boyson brings in some really cool kind of mytho-poetic stuff to the conversation, some stuff that ties a little bit more into the legends, the myths, and the lore. But we're also going to give you some pragmatic models of how to access your king, your warrior, your lover, your magician, while staying centered, while not getting caught up in these very powerful energies and parts of our psyche. So you're really going to enjoy this episode if you yourself are looking for some practices or some awareness of how to find center in your life, how to stop getting swept up by the big bad world out there and instead become the rock for you and those that you love and those around you. So enjoy this, the 5th episode of our series on the male archetypes with Doug Gillette, my co-host Boyson Hodgson, and myself as we dive into Axis Mundi. Enjoy. G'day and welcome to another episode of the Mankind Podcast, the show where we break the molds of modern manhood to prove there's more than one way to be a man. And this is the 5th episode in our series on the male archetypes, where we've had the absolute honor and pleasure to have Doug Gillette, co-author of King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, join us as we've unpacked these foundational energies of the male psyche. So Doug joins us today, and we also have my fellow co-host Boyson Hodgson as well to bring his insights and experience into this conversation as well as we dive into Axis Mundi. What is Axis Mundi? What does it even mean? And how does it work? How does it apply for you in your life on your journey in accessing these energies? So, Doug, great to have you back, mate.
Great to be back.
And Boyson, mate, welcome.
Thank you. A real pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I have to say, when we came on before we started recording, Doug and Boyson were just in the throes of intellectual conversation around, I guess, the mytho-poetic, talking about the dawn of species. And it was just so fun to watch you two go at it and just share your thoughts and ideas. And so I think this formula here is going to be a lot of fun for this conversation.
That's just me playing at being an intellectual, to try and impress Douglas Gillette.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I don't believe that. And, but if it is sincere, it's like we're all playing, okay?
Yeah. Well, I can tell you this, Doug. You see, my boy here, Boyson's from Massachusetts. You see, he's wicked smart, this kid. Wicked smart.
Yeah, I see that.
So let's jump into it. Axis Mundi. Doug, what is Axis Mundi?
Okay. You want the 25 word or less? Or
24 if you can.
Okay. I mean, it's a lot of things, but I think the pertinent thing for us, probably, I'll say for me, is that it is an altered state of consciousness. It's imaginal. there is such a thing as the Axis Mundi materially, of course. That would be most conspicuously the axis of the planet, which, by the way, is unstable, as you know, and wobbles all over the place and so forth, and so probably isn't particularly relevant, but it may be where the idea came from. The important thing is this, for me, is the psychological space that is represented by that and that can be entered, psychological, spiritual. Here's my 24-word or less definition of that. I think 3 parts. I'll make them fast. 1, the ancient Hermeticists, who were an Egypto-Hellenic mix of thought, roughly 300 BCE to roughly 300 CE, most active in Egypt, but their ideas spread all over the place. They said God is a circle whose center is everywhere and whose circumference is nowhere. So that's the first thing for me, is the center, the axis mundi of reality, whatever that really is, in all of its complexity or even its basic nature, is everywhere. It's everywhere that a person, that a consciousness recognizes it and enters it. Okay, the second thing for me is that the axis mundi, visualized as being vertical, has many levels. So it's an elevator to multiple levels of reality. And that's important because, for me, that's important because it does fit with my own view of reality, and that is, it is multi-layered. It's not confined to the material. It's not even confined to the psychological in a simple way. And the third thing I would say about it, so you get in there and you take the elevator. And the elevator, we don't know if or where the the top floor is or the bottom floor. You know, it could go on forever. The third thing I'd want to say about it, in my experience, is that you can cross-section it, you know, at every level. And what you see when you cross-section it, or what you experience when you cross-section it, is kind of like, I guess you could say, tree rings. It's ringed. So everything that we know about ripples out from it, and then in reverse, it can be contacted by sort of rippling back in. So it's for me, it's a multi-faceted thing, and should be open. We should be open to the realities, the alternative realities that it displays.
We see what you're explaining, Doug. I think we see in many different areas, like the chakras, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's one representation, I guess, of Axis Mundi. Dene, Maria Sebastiana, who's going to be on our next episode of the show talking about the sacred masculine, he talks about the energy centers of the head, the heart, the gut, and the sexual areas. And are we an open channel through all of them? Right. It's also been explained of hollow trunk, deep roots, hollow trunk. It's the connection between here in this plane on Earth and then whatever is up above, celestial, or it's the connection between that and all things. So for me, when I think of Axis Mundi, I think, am I grounded? Am I centered? Am I, or is my head stuck up in the clouds? My feet are off the ground and I'm just floating, getting washed around in the big washing machine that is that is life in chaos. So for me to find Axis Mundi is to find my center, to be present with what's happening inside and what's happening out there.
Yeah, the quiet, the still center,
Mm.
around which everything not only swirls but manifests. Um, and the question for me then is, and I don't think I know the answer to this. What is in there in the quiet, in the still center?
Beautiful.
Is it nothingness, no thingness? Is it proto-conscious? Is it unconscious? Is it supraconscious?
Yeah.
Is it
Sub or super?
yeah? Is it personal in some way, or is it impersonal? These are the great questions, and others around the world's spiritual traditions, which, as you point out, um, all have. I don't know if it's all, but it's mostly all have some varying descriptions of it, but a kind of unanimity about there is a still center. They disagree about what it is, and how to characterize it. Is it the place that we enter that finally at the very center, all words turn back? As who said that? I mean, Joseph Campbell did, but he was quoting somebody. Is it, on the other hand, is there an encounter with a consciousness inside that? I don't know. My guess would be all of the above, depending on what we're bringing as we move toward it.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in. I was thinking, hey, I know the answer to this question. It's yes. Like,
yeah, right.
To all of it. And
yeah.
I reminded of, so we've touched the chakras, we're touching on the mythopoetic, and then we could bring in some of the more esoteric, even Christian, esoteric experiences, and then Zen, right? So at the center in that space is pure awareness.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This awareness right here.
Right.
Love that. A psychological, spiritual space were the first three words that you described the Axis Mundi with. So, and this elevator, I want to start to pull us into pragmatic space a little bit. So what's the elevator look like when it's stuck on a low floor? What's the elevator look like when, it's shooting too fast through these levels of awareness and that kind of stuff? Take us on a ride in this space.
Yeah. From my perspective, there are a lot of stuck places in this. We're imagining this as vertical. And the stuckness or the zooming too fast, either one, has, I'm suspecting, has much more to do with, has everything to do with the psychological state, the state of psychological state and being in a full way of the person entering the center, so that the center in and of itself cannot be experienced. That's probably too strong. Cannot, but will be affected by, even though somehow it is impassable, somehow it is beyond anything that finite beings can bring to it. On the other hand, we are finite beings, and when we enter that, we are going to find ourselves again.
Can lines be drawn? Sorry to jump in, Doug, but can lines be drawn between the hero's journey and this example? Like, you think about the hero as they enter into the cave or descend into the cave to face the dragon, or oftentimes themselves in shadow form. And then there's the death. And the death almost represents their lack of preparedness to achieve whatever enlightenment or whatever goal, right? They need that death, that knockback. Could that be them trying to enter center and then fall off?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in the hero's journey, I mean, looked at from the perspective of Axis Mundi, the hero is, in a certain sense, we do have to die, though, to enter transcendent consciousness or whatever.
Yeah.
We have to die to our and we got this way honestly, okay? We're here in a world that is a multiplicity, in which the quiet center is not obvious and has to be sought. So we have an honest problem. As we try to enter it, we bring ourselves, as I said. And what were you asking again?
Well, it's so for me, I'm just thinking of examples that perhaps our listeners can latch on. So I think of the transformation between Gandalf the Grey and Gandalf the White.
Yeah.
You know,
there has to be a death.
The death, or I also think of historically, and I may be getting this. I hope I get this right. Buddha in the cave, right? The time, is that right?
Under the bow tree.
Under
the bow tree.
Yeah.
Under the bow tree. There you go. I don't know who was in the cave.
But he was in a cave, you know, and that's metaphorically.
Right. There you go.
Under the bow tree.
But just sitting there in nothingness, right? Is that the search?
Well, and there we get to the tricky understanding or lack thereof of what nothingness is. I mean, because it may be no thingness in the sense that we are used to things, including our own thingness. But does that mean it's zero zip nada? I don't think so. I think, I mean, as the ancient Egyptians said of autumn, one of the earliest manifestations of consciousness in the creation process, autumn is everythingness, no thingness. And but again, the practical thing for me is that about the Axis Mundi is not so much our intellectual ideas about it, but that we do get stuck. We bring our stuckness into it. And that's why, you know, there's no substitute for psycho-spiritual maturation, initiation, etc. It is, as we talked before the show too, there is about that quiet center enormous, unspeakable reassurance and also terror, because when our identities are challenged, and they certainly are challenged radically by the presence of the infinite, let's say, that is within us, it's scary. So, and about the zooming thing, so people freeze too, and they stick the elevator. I guess that's one thing I'm trying to say. What we bring to it sticks it, gets it stuck. And then psycho-spiritual process has to get us unstuck so we can move. The zooming up and down, to use the vertical image again, is probably a symptom of, as you said, Brandon, not being grounded. As someone once said, a mystic without grounding, let's say, is a sick mystic. and there's a dilettantism
Mm.
that goes on. And I would also add that while we're talking about going up mostly, we also go down, and that we've mentioned death. There are lower floors to this, in my view. And though it's a cliche, light above, darkness below, there's some psychological truth to that, or it wouldn't be so essentially universal. So if you're going to approach and enter the Axis Mundi, there's going to be light and there's going to be darkness.
Mm. It's the acceptance of all.
Which is pretty hard for finite beings.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's why I love this framework. To bring it back to the archetypes where we've come from, we started with the lover.
Good.
We started with the lover. That's the kind of the earliest energy that's developed in us, in our psyche. Then we get to the warrior, which isn't far behind that. And then, as you explained it, the magician then comes in, as well as we start to, think and start to create and use our little tool between our ears. And we can't get to the king until we've gone through those three. So we have these four energies. Just the sheer awareness of doing the work and identifying these different poles. So in the Northern Hemisphere, you've got the king in the north, you've got the warrior in the south, you've got the lover in the east, and you've got the magician in the west. So for the listeners, if you think of that like just in a picture, right? A vertical line, a horizontal line, king up top, warrior down bottom. Over in the east, you got the lover, and the west, and you got the west, the magician. Think of Axis Mundi smack dab in the middle of that, right in the center. So when I have that mind map, or when I draw, sometimes I draw it on a piece of paper to kind of identify where I'm at. And I do these check-ins. Actually, I shared at the end of the King interview, Doug, in my little outro, a meditative practice that I picked up in my early days in men's work, was to actually, welcome in the directions in the morning at sunrise, feet in the dirt, barefoot, call or welcome in the energy of the east and go, man, where's my lover at right now? Where am I at? Am I the addicted lover right now that's just wanting more and more, or am I numbing myself? Or am I in my fullness right now? And just go to eat, then change the direction. Welcome in the warrior, and then welcome in the magician and the king. That's kind of like me taking stock of where I'm at psychologically, energetically. That's what makes me feel connected to the axis. That's what makes me feel connected to the above and the below. Throw in Father Sky, Mother Earth as well. From that place, I'm able to then realize, okay, maybe I need to call in a bit of warrior right now. And what does that look like? But here's a distinction that's been described to me by elders in this work. So I know where my energies are. I'm standing in the center of them, and I need to go into my warrior. I don't just jump over into the warrior, because that would be possession of the warrior, as we've discussed, getting consumed by the warrior. It's important to keep one foot in the center, one foot tied to axis. And then the other foot can go lean over to warrior if need be, but not lose that connection with the center, if that makes sense. I'm curious of your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I had a thought as you were describing that of, with Roberts and my notion of the bipolar nature of shadows, that the Axis Mundi, I mean, there are many ways you can do the geometry. So,
Sure.
if I think, and I have thought in the past about the Axis Mundi being the balance point between the bipolar shadows of all the archetypes. And so it is, I mean, to find that balance point is one way of accessing the Axis Mundi. And it's difficult in our day-to-day lives, as you're, sorry about the phone, as you're describing it, to to find that balance point.
Mm-hmm.
It is. It's an honest struggle to find it.
Mhm.
But it is, as you said, Brandon, where you feel grounded. You know you're in the center. There's a quiet knowing that if it's not quiet, then you're not in the center.
Well, might I be so bold as I think you've mentioned something that really stood out to me, and unpaid promotional plug here for Atlas of the Heart, Brene Brown's new special on HBO. In the second episode of that, she speaks about the importance of nothingness.
Mm.
The importance of nothing. So I'm feeling this way. I might feel inclined to go to my phone and distract myself or consume some social media juice.
Mm-hmm.
Or I might go to food or alcohol or whatever other vices, where Brene, her advice is nothingness.
Yeah.
Go sit outside in your backyard. Don't listen to music. Just be.
Mm-hmm.
Observe. So when I hear you say that, Doug, I think back to what you were saying before about nothingness. Perhaps that is a huge part of it. It's not the addition of anything else so much as it is the elimination of many of these vices, distractions, things that keep us tethered to the external and disconnected from the internal.
Mm-hmm. And I would say tethered to the internal too, because it isn't like, in my view, my life experience, it isn't like it's just the so-called world out there that is distracting.
Yes.
It's the world, quote unquote, in here too, inside, that is also distracting. Hence the difficulty that people beginning meditational practice have in quieting the mind.
The monkey mind.
Yeah, it's not just the mind. Excuse me. It's not just the mind. It's the emotions. The whole finite being. Which, by the way, for me, it's important not to diss our finite experiences,
right?
And the struggle of life, and just zip on out of here. We're here, I believe, for a valuable reason or reasons.
Yeah. Right.
Or it wouldn't be. So I don't think the goal is just to escape, life as it is, including our inner lives. Somehow, what you said, Brandon, a minute ago about 1 foot in the center and 1 foot in the world. We are beings that have come equipped to do both, and supposedly, ideally, at the same time. So it's difficult.
If you're enjoying the Mankind podcast, how about taking another step? This one takes some courage, and you have it. Check out the Men's Work Introduction. It's 3 sessions over 3 weeks. New sessions start every month, and we even have a cohort tailored to LGBTQ men. Find out more in the show notes.
It's an honest struggle. I love that you've said that a few times. These are honest questions. These are honest struggles. I really love that. That's the Zen disease you just pointed to, right? It's that the enlightenment. I'm going straight up. This elevator only goes up and detaches itself from kind of everything else around it. What's true is we need a dirty enlightenment.
Yeah, right.
So you don't become a space cadet.
Our feet still anchored. The image that's come to me, and that no thingness, the other thing that, when I walk up to that edge, it's also just effing terrifying, because that's also the abyss.
Yeah.
Right. That no thingness is also in Zen. The term is shunyata. So the infinite black, the endless infinite blackness.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm visualizing, I just keep getting this kind of ball energy, this sacred space, sacred psychic space. And the archetypes end up being kind of the straps that are attached to the harness that are anchoring me into this center point.
Mm.
And there's a flexing of it. There's a bounciness of it, right? So if I'm in that center of up, down, and in the horizontal alignment of all of these areas, there's constant tension.
Yeah.
There's a constant tension that's keeping me in this center when I'm clear enough to be in that awareness.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just thought of a new process.
Okay.
Yeah, get a black hula hoop, get a
That's
yellow
right.
hula hoop, get a white hula hoop, and get a, which one am I saying? Red hula hoop, and put it around a bloke's waist and yank him around. Like,
Yeah,
how do
but
you feel?
they got to circulate at different angles. You know.
Yeah, you feel centered yet? You feel centered yet?
Not really.
Yeah, not really.
Get me out of this.
All right, good one, boys. And I think that's so important. Just the honesty of this is to, you mentioned the importance to not separate from the trials of life here on Earth, and that came up in our after our previous interview, where you wanted to kind of retcon some of the things you were talking about. You know, these ideas we have around rituals and initiations in a modern world today, that we often think new warrior training, it's an initiation that is missing throughout society that we need. Yes, but also having a kid, having a kid's an initiation, right? That's something. Or promotions, or losing a parent or a loved one. Like, these are all rituals or initiations within themselves. Which makes me think of kind of like the first stage after entering the hero's journey, like the trials, the allies, the enemies, the external starts to really flood the experience of the hero with all these experiences that kind of prepares them for what above and below and navigating between all those spaces looks like. You need those trials.
Well, we consist of those trials. I mean,
Beautiful. Nice.
We are that.
We are that. Nice.
And it's not stuff that, I mean, of course, there's the sense that stuff is happening to us, but we are happening to us too. And in the end, I think it's all us happening to us. So that's why on the one hand, I teach a lot of classes on spirituality and different world traditions and this and that and the other thing, as well as science. And it strikes me that people, I don't know, how many? Is it some? Is it many? Is it most? I don't know. But there does seem to me to be, at least in the spiritual traditions of the world, a tension between what is perhaps too universally called nature religion on the one hand, and the supernatural. And it's often talked about, and this is true, I'm sorry to say, in some contemporary psychologies too, no names mentioned, but a tendency to dissociate or the, for want of a better word, the worldly, the earthly, this world from a higher world, and opt for one or the other. I mean, you find book titles, material reality is bunk, or so there's only spiritual reality.
Right.
And the whole material thing is an illusion of some kind. Well, I got to say, if it's an illusion, it's a very, very good illusion, very convincing illusion. But I don't think it is an illusion. I think it is a manifestation of what it isn't. In other words, it's a representation of a world behind a world, behind a world, behind a world, whatever. Yeah. And it's all valuable, and it's all part of what we're supposed to be doing and living. And so once we're talking about being trapped early on, one should ideally not be trapped in the external material, etc. But one should also not be trapped in the light, because that's not what we're here for, in my view. We're here to live it.
Mhm.
And as you said, Boyson, something like bring the dirt, up with you. Because why? Because it's why we're here. We're here to get dirty.
That's why we pull and we talk about Iron John. That's why we pull the wild man out of the pond and bring him out. We don't just jump in the pond with the wild man and stay there and buddy up. We have to bring that side out, get dirty, get messy. I mean, I went through a nasty breakup once, and a good friend of mine said, Brandon, don't avoid the chaos inside of you. Go in, sit with the chaos, sit with it and all of its ugliness and messiness, but don't get stuck there.
Yeah.
Don't get stuck inside.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's the ability to, and if we bring it back again to the hero's journey, the former hero who becomes the guide, we trust the guide because they have moved through the hero's journey in all of its various forms. They can be the master of both worlds.
That's it. Yeah. Both or and I don't think it's confined to both.
Both.
I think it's actually
all worlds.
Oh, yeah. Joseph Campbell, said something like, I think it was, I forget which book, but all the gods, all the demons, all the heavens and all the hells are within you. Now, to value the lives that we are being lived, if you know what I mean. It's not like it is sort of, it's a cooperative venture. I'm living my life, but my life is being lived, in my view, by whatever is responsible for all of this. While we're doing that, for whatever reasons, which we can't see with clarity, that why do we even have to do this? And what's the benefit? What are the benefits of it, and so forth? Something. But while we're doing that, returning in awareness to the still center. Can't happen in every moment of our lives, but moving back and forth, or as close to simultaneously as possible. Dissing neither.
Yeah. Beautiful. Benefit is such a curious modern, postmodern conceptual frame, right? It's like benefit. No, at the still center, there's no benefit. It's just awe.
That is the benefit.
Yeah.
I mean, we're playing with words here. The problem with words, in my view, is that language is finally clumsy. It's like trying to put blocks together that don't fit.
Finger pointing at the moon.
Right. It is beyond words. I think we do our best through words, through discursive language and so forth, to try to get at something that can't finally be spoken. It can be experienced, but it can't fully ever be translated into discursive language, into words. But what did you just say, Boyson, that got me thinking that?
Finger pointing at the moon?
The one benefit before that.
Benefit, awe.
Oh, benefit. Yeah. Awe, what Rudolph Otto talks about, the holy, awe, overwhelming wonder, terror, but also joy and a sense of gratitude. So a whole range of emotions that we can't fully describe. in language.
Beautiful.
So I retract the word benefit in a kind of cost benefit analysis way, not thinking about it like that, but to be transformed, to feel, to be lifted up with all my armloads of dirt, of earth, of the chaos, of the all of it, being lifted up and blessed.
You look at, I'm gonna expose my geekdom here, but we're first introduced to the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Iron Man in 2008.
Yeah.
With the first Iron Man movie. And then there's subsequent films, so many of them that include him, whether at the tail end or he's a main character through another hero's story. But then we get to this moment at the end of the Avengers Endgame where Tony, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched it yet, then you're not a Marvel fan.
You're not interested.
You're not interested. Skip forward 60 seconds. Your podcast app no doubt has that. Snaps his fingers. Boom. Tony Stark gives the final of himself and dies. We would not be invested in his character or his story if we hadn't been exposed to the disgusting, nitty gritty, the worst aspects of him and his psyche and his feelings and his opinions and how he behaves as. And then if we weren't exposed also to the triumphs over trial, and we wouldn't be interested in the story if it wasn't for all of that in your arms, right?
Yeah,
the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between, which is just a reminder I often give folks that are listening to this show or doing their work. All of it is welcome. There's no way that you can just slide like a penguin on your belly through life, just with blessing after blessing after blessing after blessing. Whereas, well, it's all blessing, regardless of how your perception of it.
A deep enough and wide enough perspective, which I don't pretend that I can see all of the blessing in or experience it as blessing for some of the darkest episodes of my life.
Look at Viktor Frankl in A Man's Search for Meaning, what he went through in the concentration camps, to come out with that perspective, that awareness. Sorry, Doug, I jumped in on you there.
No, that I mean, it is all the journey that we're one way or another. We're all the euphemistic way to say it is called to. I think it's more like for me, it's more like it's called to, but it's forced to, or defined as the creatures who must not only endure, but where and when possible, which may be very limited, find the opportunities to find light in the darkness. And but also, and this is a thing Jung was big on, as you know, the shadow is not just destructiveness. The darkness, that infinite black, utterly terrifying. I had a nightmare as a kid about that. Never want to go back there again. Equally, infinite light is like, okay, I don't want either of these. I want some semblance, at least of finitude. I want something that I can be me in, that I can relate to. I can't relate to the infinite blackness or the infinite light.
Right.
As a person.
Mm.
Where was I going with that? I forget.
You were bringing us back to center. That
Back to center.
yeah.
Back to center. Yeah.
We can't be. I have a quote from an artist named Christina Caldwell. People have been wondering where the subconscious mind is in the body. The body is the subconscious mind.
Yeah. That we are so used to thinking of internal, external,
Yes.
as if there really is an external that is not internal. And I sometimes in my classes have the opportunity to ask them, okay, where is the past? It's in the present. It's now. It is now. Where is the future? It's now. Where is the mind? Oh, it's in the brain. Okay, where's the brain? In the body. Where's the body? In the universe. Where's the universe?
It's
right now.
In the psyche. Which is not to dismiss the distinctions between inner, outer, and so forth. These are part of our lived experience, but it is to say that there isn't anything that we can experience, that is not experienced in the psyche. And there is nothing outside of the psyche, because to posit something outside the psyche, it's the psyche that's doing that.
Yes.
I am so bummed that we're at time. I feel like we're just getting into the Jedi stuff.
Yeah, right. Right.
So here we back to the beginning. Psychological spiritual space is the Axis Mundi. So go back, listen to the archetypes, listen to what brings us together, the tethering that we have above, below, and on all these directions around us. And that's the space.
Yeah.
And you only get there by getting there. You're never there.
Yeah.
There's no linear path.
We're always there in some sense at a deeper, higher level. And strangely, we never get there because it is infinite and we are finite. And as Leibniz said when he was asked by one of his students, well, couldn't we reach the infinite by just keep dividing the finite into smaller and smaller pieces? And Leibniz said, divide all you want to, you'll never get there.
It's always there. The infinite fractal equation of the universe and time and everything else. Yes.
Yeah.
There we go. And Alan Watts is going to be picking up the check for us today. We are not going to be paying for our coffees. Alan Watts is going to get them for us.
Okay.
Yeah, Alan, friend of the podcast, Alan Watts, as well as
from the other side,
as well as
getting the check
as well as friend of the podcast, Brene Brown.
Right. There we
Yep,
go.
it's on Brene. I'm being brought to Simon Sinek's the difference between the infinite game and the finite game. And he says that the finite game suggests that there are agreed upon terms and rules in which there is a winner and a loser. Whereas the infinite game, it's not a zero-sum game. There's no winners and losers, and the rules aren't there either. Beautiful, Doug. Well, mate, this has been such an honor. We started this in December with the lover, and here we are. Hey, Doug, would you mind coming on for an interview to cover the male archetypes in an hour?
Yeah, right.
And we just was able to squeeze what we could on the lover in that hour, and here we are now to hear talking about Axis Mundi. I'm just so grateful to you, Doug, that you have blessed me and us with your time and your energy. And I'm going to go into my king, and I'm going to bless you that and then this is perhaps a projection too. I hope you know the countless lives that your work, Robert's work, the impact it's had. I would dare say millions of people have been impacted by the ripples of your work. And I can really only also just speak from my experience, mate. You gifted me with a bedside Bible that still to this day guides me on my journey. And I'm just forever grateful to you for being one of the great Yodas in my life.
Thank you. And let me return the favor by saying that I'm honored. Excuse me, I'm honored too. Sorry, by this kind of. This is a wonderful experience for me. Other men, other human beings that we say other, but we're really all each other. But the sharing of heart and soul and mind and being and life, the lived experience that, I mean, I don't know what it is really or why it is, but whatever it is, I in one of my lyrical illuminations, I say, why instead of nothingness has the universe been unfurled? Because there is nowhere to meet except within a world. You get it?
No. Boyson
No.
does. Boyson does.
Yeah. No world, no meeting. There is nowhere to meet if there
Right.
isn't a world.
If there isn't.
There's no us to meet if there isn't a world. And for me, the meeting, and that means you guys this morning and forever, let's say. We have met. We are meeting. And that is worth more than all the stars in the universe.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
And look what we created.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you want to close this out, Boyson?
From the Christian tradition, right? Yahweh, 4 digits, no vowels, imitating the sound of breath, one breath. Yahweh. And within that breath is all of it. Why? Because it had to.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Cool.
out.
Really
Beautiful.
cool.
Beautiful. Well,
Me too. I'm
blessings. Thank you to you, Doug. Thank you for joining us today, Boyson, and bringing in your insights and your awareness. And also, above all else, we want to thank you, the listener. You make all of this possible. And we wouldn't be producing I mean, I love these interviews. I could have been doing all these just for me to listen back to. But the fact that you are turning up each week and learning from these incredible thinkers and feelers and creators such as Doug, my hope is that with this awareness, with these tools, with these perhaps aha moments, you then get to opportunity to not only apply it and integrate it into your own life, but pay it forward. That is what I love more than anything about men's work, is not just my journey and how I get to grow, but how I get to pay this forward. It's a gift, such a gift. And you also can behold that gift too by paying this forward as well. So if throughout these series you've had any of those moments that you feel like there are those in your world that could benefit from this, the fee for this episode and Doug's valuable time is to share it with them. As for now, I've been Brandon Clift, joined by Boyson Hodgson and Douglas Gillette. And stay tuned for next week when we welcome Dene Maria Sebastiana, the Yoda of MKP, as I call him, as we talk about integrating the archetypes into the sacred masculine. Look forward to seeing you then. Lots of love. there you have it, another powerful episode of the Mankind Podcast. I hope you enjoyed that interview. I mean, if you're like me, you might have found yourself getting perhaps a little bit swept up in some of the more deeper kind of ethereal stuff. I mean, I myself am slowly getting more connected to that stuff. Perhaps people would say it's the kind of mythopoetic stuff as it pertains to manhood and masculinity and things like that. So if you yourself might have kind of lost touch a little bit to the conversation there, just know that you're not alone. I myself was at parts. However, in listening back to this episode through the editing process, I've been able to start to create those links and understand a bit more of what Doug and Boyson were talking about throughout this episode on Axis Mundi. And so at the end of the previous episode in this series of The King, I shared with you a practice that really helps me access my center, right? Get into that Axis Mundi. And that is a meditation where I welcome in each of the directions, the east for the lover. You got the king in the north, you've got the warrior in the south and the magician in the west. And if you're in the southern hemisphere, your king is actually in the south and your warrior's in the north, FYI. But yeah, so connecting with those energies helps me find that axis, find that center. But the thing that I'm really pulling away from this interview is that the good, the bad, the ugly, everything in between, as it pertains to this journey, we need to touch the shadows. We need to go there. We need to behave in ways that are totally out of our character or not in ways that we want to turn up so that we can learn, so that we can grow. And hopefully we can surround ourselves with folks that honor us through that process. Don't shame us through that process, but in fact, hold space for us as we figure that stuff out and sometimes behave like children. We all will get there eventually. Well, no, we won't. As I said in the interview, we're not going to get there per se, but this is the part of the journey. This is the path right now to just figuring life out and finding our own sense of center, our own sense of Axis Mundi. If you've enjoyed this series, you're absolutely going to love next week's interview with Dene Maria Sebastiana. He's been involved with the Mankind Project since the 80s. This is the Yoda of MKP. I mean, this man, in my mind, represents Axis Mundi. He's been through the hero's journey so many times, and he has held space for thousands of men in this work. And we're going to be talking about what it means to integrate all of these energies into the sacred masculine. Ever wondered what sacred masculine means? Well, so did I. So this interview is a lot of fun, and you're really going to enjoy it next week. Lots of love, and we will see you then. This has been another episode of the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. We have been your hosts, Paul Newell, Boyson Hodgson, and myself, Brandon Clift, and we want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. If you want to find out more about today's guests and support them in their mission, you can find links to them in the show notes. Now, if you have found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, we are always grateful for a rating and review of the show on iTunes. Now, we've got to give special thanks to our back-end team, producer, editor, and audio ninja for the show, Michael J. Russer, and Don Huff, who takes care of our graphics and promotions and pretty much makes us look pretty. So, of course, thank you, Don. Now, above all else, we've got to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you have made it possible for us to let men all over the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if something in this episode has touched you, then perhaps it is the call to action to get involved in men's work. With live trainings happening constantly and in-person trainings happening all over the world, the Mankind Project definitely has something for you. Now, if you've enjoyed the music in this episode and all of our episodes, be sure to check out Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. And lastly, just know, what it means to me to be a man is completely different than what it means for you. What it means for Paul, what it means for Boyson, that is the beauty of this journey. So if you are looking for guidance, support, and community as you begin to unpack and dive deeper into your men's work journey, then you know where to find us. Same place, same time, next week. Lots of love. We'll see you then.